everyone, and welcome back to the barn. Today we're going to be disassembling the transmission of the Model A. I probably won't be able to do all of it tonight, but this video will be on the disassembly, so you will get to see all of it right now. Benefits of watching rather than doing. To start off with, what we're going to do here, this is the bell housing. You can see this is your input shaft for the transmission. You can see the stick for the transmission up at the top here. Yeah, there you go. So this is where the transmission actually connects to the engine. The clutch would be in this space here. So we're going to remove the bell housing. That's these four large bolts on the inside here. I'm just going to take those out, and the bell housing should come right off. That's going to include the pedal post, the clutch yoke, and everything else that's associated with the bell housing. Well, hello everyone. I'm not entirely sure where this is going to fit in, but we're in the middle of a bit of a test here. The engine block holds water. You'll notice the rather precarious arrangement of gaskets here. Essentially, the coolant jackets in the engine were all full of gunk, and I wanted to clean them out. So I looked up some different ways that we could do that, and one of the best ones I found was evapor rust. So what I've done is I've put two balloons on the inlet with a hose clamp to hold them together, and then I formed and cut these gaskets. Of course, they're not very good gaskets, but they're good enough to seal it, so that we can seal it up. And I filled it with the evapor rust. Now this stuff is really cool. It's you can see it there, heavy duty rust remover, and it's super safe. And the reason is the most rust removers use some kind of acid or something to remove the oxidation. However, this doesn't. It's actually a neutral pH, which is really nice. And the reason that it's really nice is because this is obviously a cast iron engine block and head. And the problem with that is, of course, that it rusts very quickly, especially when exposed to water. These blocks are famous for having tons of rust in them, as this one did. So I want to get rid of the rust, but I don't want to take away any of the iron. And iron does get taken away pretty quickly by acid. So this, because it's neutral pH and just attacks the rust, this should take away as much rust as possible while leaving the metal exactly as it is, or was, I should say. That is exactly what I want. Hopefully that's how it works out. We'll see, but yeah. Anyway, as an additional update, the timing cover and timing side cover are off. You can see our macerated plant fiber gear here, which is pretty cool. You can also see the camshaft nut, which is quite corroded, but thankfully I don't have to take that off, so not a big deal. And then, of course, the valve cover is off, exposing the valve chest, and the oil pan is also off. A lot of this stuff has been sandblasted. In fact, some of it's right behind me. I'll show you in just a second. The pistons are out, and the rods and bearings and everything are out. They look good for the most part. There's a couple of imperfections, but nothing that's too major. That's not rust or anything. That's just caked on oil. It's essentially shellac. I've got to wash them off with some acetone or gasoline or something, but get those cleaned up. There's tons of shims in all of them. There's probably like 8 to 10 in each, so tons of adjustment and life left in these bearings. I assume, from what I've been able to see without taking the main bearing caps off, that those are going to be the same, but it seems like there's a lot of shimming left in those too. The cylinders, the cross hatching is still visible. This engine could not have been run very long since it was restored. Based on the bee's nest style front engine support springs, the front engine mount springs, that were typically available in the 70s, 60s, and 70s. Not a great design, but they were really common at that time. I'm assuming because of that, and also the nature of the gaskets in the engine and a few other things, that this car was restored in the 1970s. With that in mind, it could not have gone very far or run for very long at all since that restoration. It seems like every component in the car is essentially fresh in terms of the mechanics. Obviously, the body is gone, so that's not really great, but we've gotten really lucky here with the drivetrain so far. I still have not gotten to look at the main bearings. We'll have to see how that goes. The camshaft looks great, so yeah. More updates to come. This, I'm sure, will be a part of a much larger video of different things. But yeah, it is holding water. It's not leaking at all. Of course, it's not actually water, it's evaporous, but still, it's the same thing, essentially. It's still holding a liquid. And hopefully, in a few days, all of that rust in there will be gone. So, anyway, on to the next clip, or whatever. You want to guess what size it is?
Heavy?
Yep. All right, let's get to it. They're gonna fight. Oh, but we got it. Look, there's your shift pins.
Oh.
Those are the... Here, let's see if you can see them move. Yep.
Oh,
yeah. So, that's... actually, come on over here. I'll show you exactly what that is. So that is these two pins right here.
No.
And you can see those are the two ends that we're looking at.
Yep.
And these are the actual shift forks that engage with the sliding gears in the transmission. You can see how this works right here, right?
Yep.
So when I want to go transmissions like this, if I want to go into first gear, I go down and back, or to the left and back, excuse me. Of course it's stuck, but anyway, up here you can see how that works.
There we go.
So, but anyway, you can see that move. There we go. So now you're in neutral.
Yep.
And then to get into gear, all you do is just move it in either direction. Like that.
Yeah.
And that moves the gear into the correct position.
I'm glad you're doing it, not me. That looks like fun.
Well, in one that's not a piece of junk like that, it is quite fun. Can't wait to see how good this transmission looks inside compared to my spare. Because it's going to look real nice, I'm sure. I'm going to punch myself in the face as soon as it breaks.
Okay, I'll come over here and hold it.
Yeah. Just hold it by the, right here, don't hold it by the shifter. Just press right down on that.
Okay.
Ready?
Yep. There we go. That was just a massive amount of strength holding it back. That was the answer.
More like massive amount of heft.
It could be too.
Okay. And this one.
I would have preferred to watch you smack yourself in the jaw, though.
Oh, I'm sure you would have. Yeah.
That would have been hilarious.
It's easier.
It's been a few years since it's been apart.
Yeah, just a few. Come on, get on there.
Is that an old 5/8?
Oh no, it's
Strip
been
5/8?
damaged.
Huh?
It's been damaged.
I was gonna say, is it a strip 5/8?
Yeah. My mallet. There we go.
right? Mm-hmm. Are you tightening?
Am I?
Yeah.
Yep, you're right. Absolutely correct.
And like, what are you doing? Why are you tightening it?
Hey, at least it came off.
You're like, I'm fighting against you tightening it. Good now?
Yeah, I think
Got them all?
Yeah.
Yeah, that looks like it needs a replacement.
Yeah. Good news is I believe I got those.
Good.
I think that's the starter.
Part number 76425.
Oh. You're an ass.
You're like, what?
No one
How do you
likes
know?
you.
How do you know that?
Yeah, there we go. Transmission bolts. They're the same ones, right?
Yeah. Let's see what that number is.
Yep.
Well,
Well, it was 7.6.
Was it really?
No, 7.26.
7.26. That was just a random guess. Wasn't bad.
That was not bad. Man, those lock washers are interesting. Look at that. I think it might be going.
That's like the most awkward way of hammering.
It is. That's gotta be moving. There's no way that's not moving. Look at that. That totally wasn't there before.
I would say, yeah. I agree with you. Here's a bigger one. There we go. There we go.
Okay. Nice. That gasket is gone. Wow. Gone, gone, gone.
Let's see. Yeah. That's a nasty looking gasket.
Good news is we got another one of those.
Mm-hmm.
So, don't have to worry about that.
It smells too.
Yeah, it smells like transmission oil, doesn't it?
Like ancient transmission oil.
Well, 600 weight oil smells like that. Even just regularly. Oh, that's why. That's your countershaft right there. It's the rod for the countershaft. I'll show you that in spare transmission. Here, just a second. That is this right here. This rod.
Yep.
And you can see it on this side too.
Oh,
I can
yeah,
actually
yeah.
press that right through. That's just held in by this this piece right here, this shaft retainer.
Oh, okay.
That just bolts on like that. And then the other side is held captive by the bell housing.
Oh.
Can't go that way because it'll hit that. Can't go that way because it'll hit this. Only one fastener to hold it on in two directions. Genius of Henry Ford.
Huh.
So now that we have the decent one off, I can show you how this is supposed to work.
Okay.
So this is what you're doing when you're in neutral, when you move the transmission, the shift stick back and forth to the left and right, is you're moving between these two shift forks. So what you're doing when you go into first gear, so this is the front of the transmission, this is the back of the transmission, of course we're upside down. So when you are right side up, you're going to be going to the left and back. So we're in neutral, to the left and back, like that. So when we are doing that upside down, I'm going to go to the right, in gear, to the right over here, and back, like that. So that's first gear. So you see how this shift fork was here and it moved back.
Yep.
Well, let's go to the transmission. When you're inside the transmission, you have 2 slider gears. That's these 2. So you have this one here.
Yep.
Which is going to go right there, and then you have this one here.
Okay.
So right now, the transmission is in neutral. If I hold it up from the back here and I spin the input, you can see the input gear turning there, and you can see the counter shaft at the bottom turning, as well as the reversed idler gear turning there. So those are all the different gears turning, but nothing is turning the output. Right?
Yep.
So when I move that into first gear, you saw that shift fork move back.
Yep.
Which means that's going to move, or move forward, I meant to say. Which means that's going to move this gear forward.
Okay.
Like that.
Yep.
Now you can see, if you look down in there, that gear is now engaged with that third gear on the counter shaft.
Yep.
So as I spin this now, the output now turns.
Yep.
Notice the difference in speed between the input and the output.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So that's your ratio, which I believe is like 3.11 to 1 or something like that, 3 point something to 1 in the Model A transmission in first gear. So then we want second gear, right?
Yep.
So in second gear, if we go back to the transmission tower, for second gear when we're upright, so we're now in neutral, for second gear we want to go to the right and forward. Which you can see, when we do that, that moves the shift fork back toward the back side of the transmission. So if we go back to the transmission, we go back to our 2 slider gears, go back to our neutral position, right there and right there. No gears are engaged. If I turn the input, nothing happens. So that moved this sliding gear back.
Okay.
Which engages it, if you look.
Right into another.
With that second gear there on the counter shaft.
Yep.
Now, as I rotate this, you see it engages, right?
Yep.
And again, notice the speed differential between the input and the output.
Yep. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And now that's a ratio of something like 1.6 to 1, something like that, in second gear. So from 3 to 1 to about 1.6 to 1, or a 2 times increase in ratio, about. Then finally, we go into third gear. Now, from that, since you're moving in the same position, you're still going to the right, you're just now going down instead of up to get into third gear. You're moving the same slider gear, you're just moving it in the opposite direction.
Okay.
So what you're doing is you're moving it back like this and engaging it directly with the input shaft.
Oh, you got it direct, so it's 1-to-1 ratio?
It's a 1-to-1 ratio.
Ah.
So your 3 ratios are first gear, which is right there, a ratio of about 3 to 1. Then second gear at a ratio of about 1.6 to 1. And then third gear at a ratio of 1 to 1.
Where's fourth?
Fourth is when you're in space.
Fourth didn't come for another 20 years.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, what's really funny about that is some of the first cars ever were 4 and even 5-speed transmissions.
Probably because the engine power was so low, right?
Well, yes, but the reason is because at the time, just like we would think now, you think you have more ratios, you can do more work in different speeds. You have so little power, like you said, you can use that power differently. However, later on, like in the 30s, now 5-speed transmissions were very rare, but 4-speed transmissions did exist very early on. But even in the 30s, you saw only 3-speed transmissions. Why? Well, because people didn't like shifting. There still weren't synchromesh. Even a 4 or 5-speed transmission, you had to shift and double clutch and all sorts of things, and they were annoying. People didn't like to shift. There was an advertisement for the 1930 Cadillac V16 that came out just at the beginning of the Depression. Shop dog.
You ready to go, shop dog? You want to go back in the house? Too cold out for shop dog? Yeah, too cold for shop dog.
Anyway, so like I said, in the 1930s, there was an advertisement for the Cadillac V16 that said, with this Cadillac, you can shift into first gear, accelerate from 0 to 3 miles an hour, subsequently shift from first to third gear, and accelerate from 3 to 92 miles an hour without shifting. That's what people wanted. Now, Ford made the 3-speed because it was cheap, but everybody else made the 3-speed because people didn't like shifting.
Yeah.
So that's the whole setup. There is one more gear, though, that you can go into, and that is, of course, reverse. Now, how that works is, as you can see here, all the gears are paired, right? So you have the input.
This way again. Angle it me. This, yeah.
Working on it.
Yeah, there we go.
So all the gears are paired. You have the input.
Yep.
I can hold these in the right spot. You have the input right there, which is paired with the countershaft.
Right.
And then you have either slider gear, which is paired with another gear on the countershaft.
Okay.
Which means that the countershaft, hence its name, spins opposite the input, and the output spins opposite the countershaft. However, if you want reverse, you then have to get this to spin the same direction as the countershaft. How you do that is you add a third gear. That's the reverse idler gear right down there. That is driven off the countershaft and therefore spins opposite it. And this connects to that gear, which makes it spin in the same direction. So if I move this slider gear all the way down to engage with the reverse idler, you can see the input spins this way, the countershaft spins the opposite way, the reverse idler spins the opposite way, and this spins the same direction. And that is how you get
into reverse
gear.
Nice.
That's a basic description of how the Model A transmission works. Well, day 2 begins. We're back on the transmission here, and I'm going to remove the throwout bearing and bushing assembly thing, whatever you want to call that. I'm going to remove that, and then I'm going to take this front plate off. These just these 4 bolts, and then I'm going to remove the input gears bearing and the input gear itself, and then I'm going to take the back of the transmission off. It's just a few bolts in there as well. I'm not entirely sure how I take that off as of right now, but I'm sure I'll figure it out. Actually, I think it's just gasketed on there right now. Anyway, and then we'll take the main shaft out, we'll get the counter shaft and everything out, and put all those parts aside so that it can be reassembled later, and then take all of the gasket material off of this so that it can be put into the sandblaster and sandblasted. I'm not going to sandblast the gaskets unless they're really bad, and then I might sandblast them with like 40 psi, something like that, with glass beads. So very, very low pressure. However, the rest of it, obviously, where the paint is, I'm going to be blasting that to get the paint off so that it can be repainted. Let's go ahead and get this whole assembly here off. Okay, so all I should have to do to take this off is just remove this spring, but before I even do that and then get stuck, I'm going to take a green Scotch-Brite pad and polish up this end here so that I don't go pulling on it and it gets stuck and doesn't go anywhere. Alright, well apparently I don't have any green Scotch-Brite anywhere, and I don't feel like using the gray stuff because I don't know what it's going to do to this, so I'm just going to use a little bit of rubbing alcohol and a microfiber cloth here to try and get some of that. All it is grease, it's not rust. It's just grease that's gotten stuck on there over the years. I need more alcohol than that. Well, it got a lot of it off. It didn't get all of it off, but most of it. Most of the thick stuff anyway. Okay, I'm fairly satisfied with that. So I'm going to take this spring off and we'll pull this off. Just like that. This should come right off. Perfect. Okay, so this is our throwout hub here, or bushing, or I mean not really bushing, but that's what I was calling it before. But this is the hub onto which the throwout bearing, this right here, is pressed, just like that. So the thing is that this is definitely had a spun bearing at some point. If you can look, that is not supposed to look like that. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's got a very large divot in the middle, and that's definitely not correct. Also, it's pretty obvious when looking at the surface, if you can see it, that it has been either heated or just friction has occurred to a significant extent, and that of course happened when one of them, likely not the other one because the other one was fine, one of these throwout bearings in its past spun. What a spun bearing is essentially the bearing locks up for some reason. Either it seizes because there's no grease in it or whatever else. It gets stuck for some reason. And so it begins to instead spin on the surface it's supposed to be pressed on, which in this case is the throwout bearing hub. So essentially, instead of this being the bearing, like it's supposed to be, this became the bearing. This is not lubricated. The tolerances between that and that are so tight they're meant to be a friction fit, so of course that causes the part to fail. In this case, it seems that enough of the part was okay, enough of the surface here was okay, that they pressed the new throwout bearings on without any issue. However, this is a car that I want to last for a very, very, very long as humanly possible. So I'm going to replace this. It's only like $36 on Snyder's website, so I just purchased it, and it'll be here in a couple of days, and we'll put a brand new one on. Of course, we'll have to check to make sure that it fits. I'm assuming it's going to because these only move in and out, and they do move in and out quite a bit, but not nearly as much and not nearly with as much load as something like an engine bearing or something like that. So it's very unlikely that this has been worn away to an extent that would require machining of some kind to make them fit together. This is probably still very close to, if not, standard size. If it's not, then I guess we're going to have to do exactly what they did and continue to use this, because it's technically still possible. There is just barely enough surface to press that bearing back on. But I'm going to get a new one anyway, and hopefully it just fits right on. We'll find out. So anyway, I'm going to go put this over on the bench, and we'll get to taking off this cover here. Okay, let's get to it. So this is going to be almost the same size, I think. Yep, exactly the same size. So we'll just do exactly the same thing. There we go. Now, I believe how this works. I haven't seen yet because I don't have this component on my spare transmission. But I believe how this works is this plate is the only thing that holds in the bearing that supports the main drive gear here, the input gear. If that's the case, then this plate should come off, and I should just be able to take the input gear out as well as the bearing that's inside of it, inspect both of them at the same time. If there is some kind of retainer in there, then we'll have to see what it is and whether or not I have the equipment to take it off. But I'm hoping that Henry Ford continued his genius in designing these cars, and that this is the only thing that retains that, and it'll just come right off. That's what I'm hoping. That's what it looks like on the spare transmission to me, but like I said, I don't have this component on the spare transmission. It was never on it, so looks could certainly be deceiving. This also is probably going to be somewhat difficult to get off. I'm not sure if it's pressed in or not, but we'll see. That is disgusting. Covered in old grease, yucky, sticky, not lubricant at all grease. Okay, so now we just got to try and get this off. Hopefully this isn't a big deal, but I'm going to try and pound on this a little and hope that it might just separate. This would not be very successful if this is pressed in there, because if it is, I'm driving this on only one side, and so it'll just sort of angle itself over and not continue to be driven out. It'll just get stuck. Which is why I'm really hoping it's not driven in there, and it doesn't look like it is. But we'll see, I guess. Let me look in my transmission gasket kit and just see. Do we just have a circular gasket in there of some kind that looks like that? Yeah, we do. This one here. That one looks just like that. Right there. With those 4-bolt holes. Hopefully that means it doesn't slot in. Put this mallet on the lip. Just like that. And then smack this mallet with this one. That way I can hit much harder and guarantee I hit in the right spot. It almost looks like on there's a separate hole down here. That might be a pin or something to align it properly. And that's probably not going to come out well the way I'm hitting this. So, wonder if I just, it's probably a bad idea. Did that seem to do anything? Oh, yeah, I think it did, actually. Get a screwdriver in there and twist it. There we go. Okay. I was wrong, that's just an oil return. There is no dowel or anything in there for alignment. So all that was holding that on there, believe it or not, is old gasket. That is mind-boggling to me. But, I mean, that's the way it is. They just get stuck on like that. It's pretty impressive. Well, this looks to be in pretty decent shape. Certainly good enough to reuse, obviously. Not that I had a choice. Okay. Well, as you can see, we now have the front bearing exposed. I'm not seeing an easy way, I should say, of getting this out right now. I definitely don't want to try and stick a screwdriver in there or something out of fear of breaking whatever's in there or putting the screwdriver in the wrong spot and damaging it. So I think instead I'm going to move in a different direction and I'm going to pull the back side here. Hopefully then I will be able to somehow get pressure on this this from the back side here. I don't really know. I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to do this. I might look up a guide or something on the forums, see if somebody has an idea of how to do this. Maybe I'm just a wimp and not putting as much force into it as I should, and it would come right out. But I don't want to damage anything. So, yeah. I don't want to hit it like this. That would be a bad idea. I'd damage both bearings almost certainly. So I definitely don't want to do that. I've got to somehow get it straight out. I also don't really want to smack on the I don't really want to smack on the bearing, the center of the bearing too, because while it can support thrust, it's not designed specifically to support thrust. I imagine there are washers and things in here that are designed to support some thrust, but I mean you don't really have much force in this direction in a transmission usually. So, well, anyway, let's move on to try and get this this back half off. And I believe this is also just being held on right now by the gasket, because I don't see any other way that these two pieces can be held together. Obviously your universal joint is right here. You can see it wobbling all over the place. So let's see if we can knock this off somehow. Oh, well, that's where somebody did this before, I assume, because that definitely does not look stock. I don't know if you can see that or not. Let me get my flashlight. No, you definitely cannot see that. You can see that little lip there. 95% sure that's where somebody got in here with a screwdriver. And if they already did it, then I'm not going to worry about damaging it when I do it too. There we go. Just like that. And good news, it is full of grease, which is good. And it looks like decent grease. Looks like it was done at some point. That's quite good. It's not the old shellac horrible stuff that's been in a lot of this. So that's good. That's great news. And that just needs to have gaskets removed on both sides. And that's pretty much ready. Obviously there's no finish on this. It's supposed to be bare. So I'm going to go put it over on the table. Okay. Now that that is off, we just have this appears we just have this nut here in the middle of the universal joint, which very thankfully, and again, genius, the universal joint is completely hollow and goes all the way through, so I should be able to get a socket down in there without too much issue. So that means I don't have to take this universal joint off, and a little bit bigger. What do you know, 5/8. I'll tell you, I must have pulled off 300 5/8 screws from this car. And looks like I'm going to have to find a smaller one because that one does not quite fit. But these are impact, so they're a little thicker. Kind of makes sense. Just make sure that I'm correct. Oh, no, I was incorrect. It is not. It is 9/16. There we go. Should just be able to. Yeah. Got to find a way to stop the transmission from turning. There we go. This is fun. Get to use the transmission to unbolt itself. And with that, the universal joint should slide right off. I might have to get a puller for this. It's on there pretty good. Which is surprising to me. There we go. Jeez, that took a while to figure out how exactly I was going to do that, but the universal joint is now moving. There we go. It does indeed slide right off. You shouldn't need a puller. It also probably shouldn't be that tight. I don't see particularly why it is that tight. Interesting. Very interesting. Well, anyway, that's now off, and it's in fine shape. There's nothing wrong with it. A little bit of surface rust inside here, but I'm literally cleaning it off with my finger, so I'm not worried about that whatsoever. The universal joint seems to be in fine shape. There's you hear these noises. These are not tolerances that are bad. It's not supposed to deal with forces in that direction. It's supposed to deal with forces in this direction, which if you listen, no noise whatsoever, and that's because the tolerances are very, very good. So no issue with that. I'm going to go put it on the bench. Alright, now thankfully there is a ton of grease in here, which kept that in good shape. However, not so thankfully, there is a ton of grease in here that I now have to clean out. So I'm going to get a not nice microfiber towel. I'm going to get a crappy rag and take this grease out because there is a lot of it. Okay, well that looks about half decent. So I'm going to cut the safety wire here and go ahead and pull that out. And then we can take out those 4 bolts that connect the front side of the clamshell housing to the transmission. Obviously, this will all be replaced and tied up or twisted up properly as it's supposed to be. Okay, I'll take a little bit more grease out because there was some more behind the safety wire, so I'll try and get some of that out. Okay, now we can take out these 4 bolts, which are going to be 5/8 as usual. I'm going to get the breaker bar because that is pretty tough. Honestly, probably these bolts are in such good shape, at least from the outside. I don't really know how they couldn't be intended to be that tough. Plus, I believe that is the only connection between the back half of the transmission and the driveline, which is a good portion of the suspension. That's what the whole clamshell and, like, I don't even know, globe thing is like kind of almost like a wishbone for your rear suspension. So not a surprise that these are supposed to be on there good. And they are on there quite good. You can see all that grease is still in there. Hasn't all been taken out yet. Good job, whoever last greased this. Looks as though those have been taken off 3 times, or I should say replaced 3 times. It looks like they're the same as the original, but you can see 3 different locations where the lock washers have dug into the hole here. So looks like this was originally done in, then restored, and then for whatever reason taken apart again. Could be that this was restored once and then second time. It's possible. Could have been restored earlier than the 70s, could also have been restored later than the 70s, and you never know. Maybe the engine work was done much later than the 70s, but the rest of the restoration was done in the 70s. That could be as well. Although it doesn't really explain the gaskets being very old, that old style of gasket. Something to ponder over, although I doubt I'll really ever know. There really is not much of a story on this car, which is sad. Someday I'll contact the previous owner and see if he has the contact information for who he got it from. And that way I might be able to find some more story for it, but not as of yet. Well, I'm going to label up all these bolts. I got a little pile going on here, and throw them in the bin, and we'll take this off. After cleaning up all my tools from all the grease that was left in this thing, which is a good thing, you know, it's annoying, but it's a good thing. If they hadn't done that, then I could have been in much worse shape here. I'm sure universal joints are not cheap, although I haven't looked because I don't want to die of a heart attack. However, we're looking great. So I'm gonna move to pulling off this, which is the forward end of the clamshell from the transmission. The bolts are out. That's what we just removed. Which hopefully will come off fairly easily, although looking at it from the outside, I don't know. It looks like it's on there pretty good, but we shall see. Uh-oh. Sorry. My bad. There we go. Okay. Okay. There we are. Well, this looks to be in pretty good shape. Let me wipe some more grease out. Internally, it looks fantastic. Yeah, let's put it in the light a little bit. There you go. Externally, it looks alright. Just needs to have that gasket removed. There is a little bit of rust in some areas, but not anything that we can't fix with a sandblaster. So I'm going to go put this on the table. Alright, now we just got to get this bearing out, which at least in the spare transmission is very easy. It just comes right out. But we shall see about that. Does not look like that's going to happen because I'm pushing on this And, oh, well, that wouldn't really do much of anything, would it? Yeah, that was kind of dumb of me. Hey, how about, here's an idea. How about I go and grab, oh my gosh, there's so much grease everywhere. How about I go and grab the universal joint bolt and put it in there so I have something to grab onto. And I'll probably be able to pull that right out. There we go. So universal joint bolt. Thread that right in there. And now I have something to pull on. And there's a, I'm not going to pull it out of the spare transmission right now, but there is a sort of a retaining ring on the backside there that holds the bearing, or stops the bearing from moving in that direction, that way, in relation to the shaft, which means if I pull the shaft out, it should also pull the bearing out with it, hopefully. That's the idea, at least. Excuse me. So let's see. Will this move at all? Not really. Okay. What can I do to get it to move a little? I really don't want to use this because I'll destroy my threads. Looks like I can get a screwdriver in there. I don't really want to, but I might try. Don't really have a great angle to get at it. Yeah, that's not gonna work. That's just a bad idea. Just a bad thing waiting to happen right there. How do I want to do this? That I can hit, I believe. Let me try hitting that. Looks like I can hit there. Does that move at all? So this is probably a bad idea, but I have this brass rod here, which should deform far before anything in the transmission does. I'm going to try hitting the input gear and see if maybe I can get this bearing to come out. This bearing should just come out. It should just slide out, but something, probably just age and maybe some gasket sealant, is holding it in there. So hopefully it comes out without too much effort. If I'm putting too much force on it, I'm just going to have to stop and come up with another game plan. But I want to try this out just to see, because I don't think it's in there super hard. I think it's just in there a little bit. Has that moved at all? I think that might have done it. I think that might have moved it. Oh yeah, it definitely did. Okay, good. Good, all right. There we go. Okay. That is that. Yeah, looks like some kind of gasket sealant or something was put in here to try and keep oil from getting past the outside of the bearing, I guess. Well, won't be needing that. You know, the whole point of this transmission is to leak. I know modern EPA standards, blah, 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 you know, dropping oil all over the ground, whatever. There are not very many of these cars. There's a lot for old cars. But there are not very many of these cars left on the road. And very, very, very few of them drive any significant distance. So if you are dropping any oil on the ground, it's in your shop. And then it's disposed of in a way that's probably environmentally friendly. This car will, hopefully, if I do my job correctly, be driven often and for long distances. However, the part of this transmission that people often, and the engine too, in every way, that people often misunderstand is that oil is a good thing in every place, pretty much. You know, oil stops oxygen from getting to the surface of metal and stops it from corroding. That's why you put gun oil on guns all the time. Stops the barrel, which is essentially just metal with a slight coloration to it, from corroding. Now, I'm not saying go and spray the whole underside of your car with oil, because that's a bad idea. Obviously, brakes don't want oil. Obviously, your tires don't want oil. However, Stuff like your transmission, it does want oil. And the best way to keep stuff from seizing up like this is not to put gasket sealant on it. First off, I don't know if you recognize it, but this is not a sealed bearing. That just has a wide open hole in it around the outside edges. So no matter how much gasket sealant you put around this bearing, it's not going to stop oil from getting through there. If your gaskets are good and your bearings are correct and your tolerances are correct, you should leak minimal oil. But that leak is a good thing. Yeah, you have to replace oil all the time, but listen, oil is cheap, parts are not. You might as well keep your stuff oiled, keep it working properly, and leak a little teeny itty bitty bit of oil on the ground. Mostly when you're stationary, by the way. It leaks at the same rate whether you're moving or not. Maybe the engine's a little different, like engine oil and things like that, because pressure might have something to do with it. But in the transmission, your leak rate is going to be almost exactly identical, if not identical, when you're moving versus when you're stopped. Which means that most of the oil is going right into your drip tray or whatever it is that you have under your car to catch it. If you don't have anything under your car to catch it, then I guess it's your floor or the ground, but I don't think there's many Model A owners out there that don't have something underneath their engine oil pan and their transmission to catch oil. So that's my 2 cents. In my opinion, it's pointless to try and seal it up as best as possible. It was not necessarily designed to have oil go through all of that, but it certainly wasn't designed to keep all that oil from going through. So I wouldn't worry about it, and I'm not going to. If it leaks a little, it leaks a little, and I will replace the oil. It gives me something to do. And honestly, here's sort of a idea that I have about most of my machinery, is that when you have something that you have to go and check all the time, like your engine oil, like your tire pressure, things like that, it makes you go and actually look at that, but also the things around it. You know, could you imagine how many people would miss bad wheel bearings or loose lug nuts if they didn't go to check their tire pressure? Could you imagine how many people would, miss that their tires are really worn out and need to be replaced, or they'll blow out, or, maybe in an ice storm will slip and slide all over the road if they didn't go to check their tire pressure every once in a while? Or, even better, maybe there are a lot of people that wouldn't see how low their tire pressure is if they didn't go and check their tread all the time. So having something to check, like your transmission oil, like your engine oil, like your coolant level, gives you an opportunity and an excuse, a necessary excuse, to go and look at those components of the vehicle with a close eye, and usually that helps you spot things before they go wrong. So I actually prefer vehicles like this where you have to go and check them, because if you don't, then you just leave it and eventually problems arise that you have no idea about, and then a catastrophic failure occurs. Not to say catastrophic failure won't occur if you, inspect everything all the time and take care of it, but you're less likely, at least in my opinion. All right, let's get this rear bearing out, which now should be quite easy. It should just come right out. Doesn't seem to be moving yet, but it does not want to. See if I can persuade it a little like I did the other one. Appears as though the same kind of sealant or whatever has been applied to this bearing as well. Yep, started to move. Okay, good. Okay. There we go. That is that. Yeah, a little bit of rust in this one. But also whatever gasket sealant thing they had in there, like I said. Thankfully, though, it looks to be in phenomenal shape. The gears as well look to be in great shape. From what I can tell, there is almost no wear whatsoever on these gears. They look phenomenal. Although it is fairly easy in comparison to change the sliding gears than it is to change the cluster gear, so I'll have to take a look at that when it comes out. But the first and reverse gear also looks phenomenal, at least in this direction. I don't see any evidence of wear whatsoever, except that. Looks like there's a pretty significant score in one of these teeth. That's interesting. It almost looks like it was stamped in there rather than anything else, but I'll have to assume that it was some kind of debris or something that got in there. It could also have been rust. That's entirely possible. There is rust in a couple of spaces, but nothing bad. Well, let's take a quick look. You can see the teeth there look to be in really good shape. And even in the other direction too. So that is the first and reverse sliding gear. The input looks great. The gear itself looks very good. Does have some wear. This one is definitely worn more than those gears are. No doubt at all about that. You can definitely tell where this has been used. So this was not replaced when either the engine or transmission work was done, depending on what order that happened in. So this definitely has wear on it, and it's definitely somewhat significant. I can see it very clearly. It's very obvious where this has been worn, but there is no damage, which is fantastic. The wear is just what you would see typically. And then obviously your shaft here, there's a little bit of rust there in the bearing. That's where it usually is. This shaft might actually be original. There is some what I would think of as like checking in a log at the end here. So there's some kind of cracking, some stress cracking that has been occurring in this. However, it is not appearing anywhere in the surfaces that matter. Just at the two ends, which is odd. I wonder why that is. Could just be that, no, that wouldn't do it there. Huh. Very interesting. I don't know what that is, or what that could be. Here's what I'm looking at. If you look at the end here, I'm going to get you a light. You can see that there, I think, that there's some what almost looks like cracking in it. But like I said, none of that cracking appears in the surface of the material. There's no spalling or anything anywhere.
Okay, I'll remember this.
Shut up, Alexa. However, it does look like there is some odd cracking developing at the ends here, which is very interesting. That is very odd. I wonder what happened to this thing. And it's at both ends too, which is the most odd part in my opinion. Anyways, moving on. Bearing is in fantastic shape, as I expected. Everything on this car that is mechanical has been in fantastic shape, and I believe that's because the total restoration was done on the engine, transmission, and everything. At this point, it's everything. There's nothing on this car that wasn't touched in this restoration. So, which is very lucky for me. It's unlucky that I don't have a body. It's very lucky that I have every other mechanical component that seems to be in nearly perfect condition. So, now that I say that again, my main bearings will be totally gone, but we'll have to see. I've got a tool coming in, the 9/16 square socket, the 4-point socket, that you would normally use for like a pipe plug or something like that, for black iron pipe. But you also use it for the Model A main bearing bolts. So that's coming in the mail. It should be here in a couple of days, which will coincide with when the engine should be at least mostly rust-free, where I'll be ready to drain the evaporust out of it. At which point we will move it over onto its side and hang it from the inlet of the water system, the water cooling system. Those 2 bolts are apparently strong enough to support the load of the engine on its own. However, I'm actually going to make a small angle iron bracket to bolt 2 of the oil pan bolts to it as well, and that'll take care of mounting the engine to the stand on its side. Then we'll pull the flywheel off. The pilot bearing looks perfect, so it's going to stay right in there. I'm not going to try and press it out. Pull the flywheel off of the engine, take the crankshaft out, and get the engine block ready to be sandblasted. Let me go put this stuff back. I'm going to put this back in its bag. This is the bolt for the universal joint. I'm going to put that back in its bag, and then I'll move all this stuff over to the table, and we'll get to removing the counter shaft, or the cluster gear, depending on how you want to call it. Okay, continuing on. This should be the easy part. This is removing the counter shaft and the reverse idler gear. All I have to do is pull this small bolt here, which holds in this retainer. All this is a machined bracket, not even bracket, just a piece of plate steel that's a rectangle that fits into a slot in the reverse idler gear shaft, which holds it from moving in either direction, and then into a notch in the countershaft shaft, I guess, the shaft within the countershaft that holds it from going in this direction, and at the other end it's held in by the flywheel housing, I believe. Either that or the yes, held in by the flywheel housing. So it can only come out if you remove the flywheel housing and you remove this retainer. Again, genius by Henry Ford to only have one fastener for nearly everything rather than having 2 like you would probably normally have. Okay, time for the breaker bar. That one's actually not in there very tight, but it's kind of awkward to try and turn the bolt with the transmission the way it is, so I'm just going to try and do it like this, if possible. See, I'm trying to turn it and not turn the transmission. There we go. This bolt must be a class 3 fit. I don't remember it being that difficult to take out in the spare transmission. That's a little bit concerning to me. Boy, it certainly did want to be in there and did not want to come out. Oh, thread locker. That'd be why. That makes sense. And a really nice copper washer there too. I've got to make sure to keep that. I didn't realize that was supposed to be copper. Anyway, I'll show you how this works now. Let me just wash my hands. Okay, so very simply how this works is you just have this piece of square steel that, like I said, goes into a slot in the reverse idler and a notch in the countershaft shaft, and that's all it is. It just holds those 2 on. It's just a piece of square steel. So now the reverse idler shaft can move around, like you just saw I moved it there, and so can that, although it's probably touching the table right now so it won't move. So all I got to do is pull the reverse idler out Just clean it up a little bit, pull it out, it'll come out real easy. And then for the counter shaft, I think you come from the other side. I don't know. It's one-sided, at least if I remember correctly. So you just pound it out in one direction, and it comes right out. So let's get to that. So back here, I'm just going to press. I'm going to get actually a rag first and clean off around that reverse idler gear shaft at the outside here. Let's get some of that grime off. This here is the only disadvantage to having leaks, is that you get grime all over it. But if you wash your car regularly and you get to areas like this that do leak and clean them off, that's not a problem. And that's what I plan to do. Again, remember, if it's convincing me to get under the car to take a look at it, it's probably a good thing, because then I get under the car to look at that and other things. Anyway, that shaft comes out real nice and easy. And there we go. That's our reverse idler shaft. And there we go. And there is the reverse idler gear. So this looks to be in great shape. The bearing inside of it, bushing inside of it, I should say, this is a plain bearing, or bushing, if you want to call it that, is in very good shape. In fact, it's actually a bit corroded because it's never been used so much, or it hasn't been used very much. There might be some. No, it's just corrosion. Yeah, just corroded, which is hilarious. But it shows you. I mean, reverse is obviously the least used gear. You only use it to back up. So more often than not, the damage in a reverse system is from unuse, it just seizing or something like that over time from not being used, not keeping it clean, just from moving, rather than anything else. It does look like this transmission might have been repaired. The case, at least, might have been repaired, because there's this really odd, like, welded thing on here. At least it looks like it's welded. It could also have just been a casting mistake that was changed. That's probably more like what it is, but it's interesting. It gives this transmission a little character. Also, I've got a number in here that says 19. Not quite sure what that means, but yeah, 19. Interesting. That could be a Ford part number, or maybe I don't know, I really have no idea, a batch number maybe, something like that. Okay, and then the counter shaft just comes out. I just pressed it out with my finger on the other side, and it just comes right out, just like that. Boom. It just needs to be cleaned up a little bit, and that's perfect. No scoring or anything. It looks great. Fantastic. All right, let's get this cluster gear out. Be careful if you are following along, which I kind of don't suggest, but if you are, for whatever reason, you have a counter shaft that you are pulling out of a transmission right now, be careful to keep the transmission as level as possible, because if those bearings fall out and you accidentally crush them against these big holes here, you're going to be in not a nice place. Okay, there we go. And then you just take your bearings out. So we got one on this end, right there. One on this end, right there. Ooh, that's cool. That's been modified. It's got new rollers in it with some oil slots. And then you just have a spacer in the middle that seems to be stuck in there for whatever reason. Well, good opportunity to use my brass. What the hell? Is that cast in there? It is cast in there. Well, that's different. Well, I don't know when they did that, but this one does not have a spacer. Very odd. Thankfully, I do have another cluster gear from my spare transmission that is original. But that is definitely not original. That spacer is cast into the cluster gear. Not that it really matters, of course. But, and someday when I use this enough, I'll have to replace it anyway, and it'll go back to being original. But that is interesting. I've never seen that. Wow. Well, anyway, cluster gear's out. That means the transmission is almost entirely disassembled. The only two things left are the two plugs, the inlet and outlet, or fill and drain plugs, if you will. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some brake clean to this and remove all the sludge at the bottom. There isn't very much, thankfully, but just remove as much of that as possible and pull those plugs out, and this will be pretty much ready for blasting. I'm going to leave these locking rings in here because I'm not going to get anywhere near either of these two gasket surfaces. I'm going to take those off with my gasket scraper, and I'm not going to touch those with the blaster at all. I'll just go around this outside edge here and take off the paint, so I'm not worried about any of those. And yeah, that's great. So with that in mind, other than the water inlet, the flywheel housing, the cylinder head, the water pump housing, or water pump, yeah, I guess housing, water pump thing, the fan, the oil fill, and the engine block itself, I believe. Oh, no, and also the crank pulley. Everything that needs to be sandblasted or painted has been removed. Which means that I can now get to sandblasting, which will be on camera. It'll just be a time lapse, so it's not going to be off camera, but it'll just be a time lapse video that I upload separately. And that will just be me sandblasting every component that I've taken apart, all the components of the transmission that are going to be painted, all of the components of the engine that I've taken off already that are going to be painted. Like I said, once we're done getting the rust out of it, the cylinder head will come off, the water pump will come off, the flywheel housing will come off, the water inlet will come off, and the crankshaft pulley will come off, which will be blasted and get ready for paint. And then the engine block itself, once it's completely stripped of all its components, especially the crankshaft, camshaft, valves, valve guides, so on and so forth, that will go into the blaster and get blasted as well. So getting very, very close. I've got, today is Tuesday? Is today Monday? I can't remember. It's either Monday or Tuesday. Pretty sure it's Tuesday. So, yes, it's definitely Tuesday. So, I have until the 5th. Today is the 31st. To get this engine as far as I possibly can. The 5th, I have a flight down to Florida to see my grandmother for a week, which is going to be great. I will be coming back afterwards, but I'm going immediately back down to school, so I won't be here for very long. So, today's the 31st, tomorrow is New Year's. That means I have, essentially, after today, 4 days to get this done. 4 days. Now, I will have some help. I have a few people lined up that are going to come over and help, but my friend Winfield might be here. Obviously, my father, he loves to help out, so he'll be around, I'm sure. A good friend of mine, Dan, from school, is going to be coming up to help for a couple of days, and he'll be here, like, here, working just to do that. And then I also have another friend that I actually mentioned the car to recently, just out of the blue, random, essentially, just talking about stuff, and it happened to come up. And he was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Can I come up and help you sometime? I was like, yeah, of course, absolutely, I'd love it. So he's probably going to come up and help it sometime as well. So, 4 days. The plan tonight to get as much of this blasted as I can. I still have the oil pan in there. I can 1,000% get the oil pan done and completely sandblasted tonight. I have a few parts sitting over there that have been sandblasted and are ready to be painted. I also got a paint tent, a small one, that's going to go over on the bench there. That will be set up tonight, and I'll get some painting done. Hopefully all those parts will be painted and ready to go pretty soon. And then the rest of the parts that I get blasted tonight, I'm going to work on the bell housing and all the rest of the components over there that are ready to be sandblasted. As long as I get all those done, maybe not tonight, but by tomorrow, they will all be painted tomorrow. So anyway, as I was saying, I got interrupted by the air compressor. Hopefully, by tomorrow, most of the stuff for the engine and transmission assembly will be sandblasted and ready for paint. Tomorrow I'll be painting a lot of it before Dan gets here, which means that most of it will then be ready to go back together. A lot of it will still need to be cleaned and assembled, but that's not really a big deal. I'll take you over to the table now. Actually, I'm going to take this stuff over to the table first, and then I'll take you over to the table so you can see all the parts laid out. There's a lot of stuff over there. The cylinders and everything, the pistons and everything have been taken apart and are laid out over there well in sequence. Not much else has been organized, so it's not super organized. Don't look for any organization. But yeah, I'll show you what's been sandblasted, what's ready to be sandblasted, what's ready to be painted, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to take these over to the table first, though. And with that, that is the transmission assembly, the actual transmission assembly, complete. And this is our table here. So you can see the transmission components over here along with a couple of engine components. And then the pistons over there along with the oil pump drive. And it's not organized, but whatever. You have all the transmission components here. Cluster gear, 2 sliding gears, your reverse idler, universal joint, the clutch, throwout bearing, the throwout bearing hub, the output shaft, the input shaft, and then the cluster gear shaft or counter shaft, the reverse idler shaft, and then the 2 bearings for that. The bearing for the input is actually just stuck in there so that I remember it. And then we have, of course, the different housings that are ready to be cleaned up. The bell housing, that's going to be a big part to sandblast. There's so much on this that needs to be cleaned up and painted. I'm also going to paint the inside, at least I think I am, just for longevity's sake. Again, I want this car to last as long as possible. If forever is possible, then that is the goal. So I'm going to paint the inside too so that it doesn't continue to rust like they usually do. That seems to have been done in the previous restoration with the flywheel housing. The flywheel housing was painted on the inside. At first I was a little confused why, and then I thought about it. Wait a minute, nobody's ever in there. It doesn't make any sense for it not to be painted. There's no oil in there, at least you hope there's not oil in there. So what is there to keep corrosion from happening? Well, nothing. You might as well paint them, especially when it's off. So that's what I think I'm going to do. But this is going to get done. This is going to get sandblasted. Just this small section here is going to get sandblasted. The back side of this is going to get sandblasted. Obviously, I'll take the zerk fitting out first. And the transmission shift tower. I have the tool, the special tool to remove the spring from this coming. That will get sandblasted as well. And then the cylinder head, the flywheel housing, obviously the engine block, the water pump thing, the crankshaft pulley, and the water inlet, and of course the oil fill. All of those things will get sandblasted and painted. This fan is not going back on. I have a aluminum tube light fan that I got for very, very little money. So I'm going to be replacing this with that just because I don't feel like having this go through my hood or my radiator at some point. But yeah, all that stuff's going to get done. It's just going to be great. I'm so excited for this thing to be done. I probably won't have enough time to put it back in the car, but I will almost certainly have enough time to at least get everything sandblasted and painted. Maybe not reassembled, but sandblasted and painted, ready to be reassembled. And then it'll only take a couple more days to get it reassembled and back in the car. And that is going to be really, really exciting. That will be the first stage of this restoration done, and a pretty big stage at that. So, anyway, let's take a quick look while we're here. Definitely seems to be doing something. I don't remember being able to see metal around there. At least that's what I think I'm looking at. It appears to be metallic, which is great because that means it's pulled all that rust off of the impeller there, which was in really bad shape, to say the least. So hopefully my eyes are not playing tricks on me, and that is actually bare metal. And that's hopefully what the rest of the engine is also looking like. I guess we'll find out when we take the cylinder head off, but yeah. Anyway, I think that's going to conclude it for this video. The next video that I will be posting will be the time-lapse of all the components being sandblasted. Might actually come out before this, I'm not entirely sure. Depends on how much time and energy I have to edit. The time-lapse footage won't be edited at all, so it might go up before this video. But the next video will be finishing the disassembly on the engine, removing the valves, removing the camshaft, removing the crankshaft, and then hopefully after that, sometime, putting it back together. Almost forgot. These are the parts that I've already sandblasted, not including the oil pan, which is out in the sandblaster right now. These were not sandblasted, they were just cleaned up with the wire wheel and polished. Those are going to be painted black up until the threads, obviously. This whole thing's going to be black. And these two are going to be engine green, and that's going to be black. I believe that's supposed to be black. I will check on that before I paint it. But anyway, that is going to be it for this video, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.